There are some stories that never leave us, some mysteries so chilling, so haunting, they echo across generations. One of the most infamous cases in American history is the murder of Elizabeth Short, better known by the name the press gave her, the Black Dahlia. She was just 22 years old when her life ended in a way so brutal, so shocking, that it captivated the nation. And to this day, no one has been held responsible. This isn't just a story about a crime, it's about a dream cut short, an investigation that spiraled, and a legacy that still casts a long shadow over Los Angeles. In 1947, Elizabeth Ann Short was a young woman in Los Angeles. She had come west with hopes like many others, wanting to be part of the Hollywood dream. People remembered her for her striking appearance and the way she carried herself. She stood out. Maybe that's part of why the media gave her a nickname that would outlive her, the Black Dahlia. The name supposedly came from her taste for dark clothing and a popular film at the time, The Blue Dahlia. But once her body was found, the nickname took on a darker meaning. Elizabeth had spent time working at Camp Cook in California a few years earlier, in 1943. She'd also had a run-in with the law in Santa Barbara, where she was arrested for underage drinking. Both of those incidents ended up in her FBI file. Details that might have seemed small then, but took on new weight after what happened to her in January of 1947. On the morning of January 15, 1947, a woman named Betty Bersinger was walking through a neighborhood in South Los Angeles when she saw something strange in a vacant lot. At first she thought it was a mannequin, sliced clean in half, but it wasn't. It was Elizabeth Short. Her body had been mutilated in a way that stunned even seasoned detectives. She had been bisected at the waist, her face slashed into a gruesome forced smile, and parts of her body had been removed. The level of precision made some investigators believe the killer had medical training or surgical experience. Her remains had been washed and carefully posed in the lot, as if whoever did this wanted the body to be found, wanted the scene to make a statement. It was not just a murder. It felt like a performance. There was no blood at the scene. That told investigators she'd been killed elsewhere and transported to this spot afterward. Whoever did this took their time, and they left behind almost no physical evidence. The LAPD launched an enormous investigation, and the FBI was brought in to assist. They identified Elizabeth using fingerprints already in the FBI system from her earlier job and arrest. From there, the investigation expanded. Interviews, suspects, media coverage, and a public that couldn't look away. And yet no arrests were made. Even though the investigation was one of the largest in LAPD history at the time, they couldn't find the person responsible. Over 60 people confessed to the crime. But none of those confessions held up. Some came from people who wanted attention. Others were clearly false. And still, the case dragged on, no closer to being solved. One of the difficulties was the overwhelming media attention. Reporters were everywhere, sometimes interfering with the investigation. At one point, someone even sent Elizabeth's personal belongings, like her birth certificate, photos, and business cards, to the local newspapers. The items had been cleaned with gasoline, just like her body. The envelope included a note signed, Black Dahlia Avenger. It was a taunt, and it suggested the killer was watching the investigation unfold. Over the decades, countless theories have been proposed, but three names come up again and again. The first is Leslie Dillon. He was a bellhop with an interest in criminal psychology. He knew surprising details about the murder, including references to surgical procedures. Dillon had connections to a man named Mark Hansen, a nightclub owner in Los Angeles, who was also linked to Elizabeth. Some believe Dillon was involved and that Hansen might have helped cover it up, or himself had something to hide. Then there's Dr. George Hodel, a wealthy physician and former public health official in Los Angeles. Hodel became a suspect years later when his own son, Steve Hodel, a retired LAPD detective, began investigating his father. Steve found old photos and handwritten notes that he believes tie George Hodel to Elizabeth Short's murder. He also uncovered audio recordings from a 1949 LAPD surveillance operation in which George allegedly made suspicious statements, including one where he seemed to suggest he'd gotten away with murder. But George Hodel wasn't arrested. In fact, shortly after these investigations, he left the country. Another theory centers on Dr. Walter Bailey, a surgeon who lived near the spot where Elizabeth's body was found. Some researchers suggest Bailey had the knowledge and proximity to be involved. While he wasn't a known associate of Elizabeth's, the speculation continues. Despite all these theories, no one was ever charged. Despite the LAPD's intense efforts, the case grew colder by the day. Public interest remained sky-high, but real leads were hard to come by. False confessions continued to pour in. The case file grew fatter, and the mystery deepened. Detectives faced serious challenges. For one, forensic science was still in its early days. DNA analysis didn't exist. Even fingerprinting required physical matches, and with the killer meticulously cleaning everything, including the body and belongings, there was almost nothing to go on. On top of that, there were rumors of corruption. Some suspects, like Dillon, had possible links to people in law enforcement. One theory, raised by author Pugh Eatwell in her book Black Dahlia, Red Rose, suggested that Sergeant Finis Brown may have played a role in letting a suspect go. That suspect? Leslie Dillon. Eatwell points to possible connections between Dillon and Mark Hansen, as well as discussions from sources like Buzz Williams, whose father was a member of the LAPD's gangster squad. According to the theory, there was pressure from powerful people to let the matter drop. Whether that's true or not, what's undeniable is that Elizabeth Short's killer was never found, and the silence around the case became just as loud as the crime itself. Steve Hodel remains one of the most vocal believers that his father was the killer. Over the years, he's gathered what he sees as a growing body of evidence: photographs, handwriting samples, witness testimonies, and the chilling recordings from the LAPD's own bugging of the Hodel residence. He's even traced Elizabeth's final movements. According to his reconstruction, she was last seen alive in the company of 2 men and 1 woman on January 14, 1947. Steve believes these individuals were his father, George Hodel, artist Fred Sexton, and possibly his stepmother, Dorothy Houston Hodel. He claims Elizabeth was taken to the house at 5121 Franklin Avenue, where she was tortured, murdered, and later transported to the lot in Leimert Park. The method used to bisect her body, a hemicorporectomy, a procedure known only to those with significant surgical training. This theory also includes paper sacks used for cement and fertilizer being employed to move her remains. Details like that make the theory feel disturbingly plausible, but others disagree. Critics have pushed back against Steve's claims, questioning the strength of the evidence and whether it definitively links George Hodel to the crime. Still, his work has sparked renewed interest and debate about what really happened. Another compelling idea, proposed by journalist Larry Harnish, points to Dr. Walter Bailey. Harnish found that Bailey lived just a few doors down from where Elizabeth's body was found and had family connections to people in the area. According to this theory, Bailey's possible mental deterioration, combined with surgical skills, might explain both the precision and the motive behind the crime. Again, though, there's no hard proof, just puzzle pieces, and too many missing ones. Elizabeth Short's death became more than just a crime. It became a cultural obsession. Over the years, her story has been retold in books, movies, and documentaries. James Ellroy's novel, The Black Dahlia, fictionalized the case, turning it into a noir tragedy. Films like The Black Dahlia took the story to the big screen. Podcasts, TV shows, and even video games have referenced her case. The real woman at the center of it all, Elizabeth, often gets lost in the retellings, but behind the nickname and the headlines was a person, someone who was looking for something more, someone who didn't deserve the fate she met. To this day, the LAPD has a detective assigned to the case, and researchers like Larry Harnish and Steve Hodel continue their pursuit of the truth, even if it remains elusive. The location where Elizabeth's body was discovered, Leimert Park, is still there. The Biltmore Hotel, where she was last seen alive, still operates. The names connected to her case, George Hodel, Leslie Dillon, Walter Bailey, they still get whispered in true crime circles. And every January, like clockwork, the case reemerges in headlines. The Black Dahlia is more than a mystery. It's a symbol of something unsolved, something unsettling, a shadow that refuses to fade. So that's the story of Elizabeth Short, the Black Dahlia, a young woman whose dreams led her to Los Angeles and into one of the most haunting mysteries in American history. A case that, even after all these years, leaves us with no answers, only questions. Was it someone close to her? Someone with power? Or just a ghost in the city, gone before the sun came up? Now it's your turn. Let me know your theory in the comments. Who do you think was behind the Black Dahlia murder? If you found this case as compelling as I did, go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next dive into history's darkest corners. Thanks for watching, and until next time, stay curious and stay safe.